We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
In 5, 4.
Let me see this.
It's a loyalty oath to America.
Are you now, or have you
I
ever
thought it was a
been?
joke at first. Moreau signed it.
Moreau signed it? If you don't sign this, are you and I a target?
If I don't sign it, they'll fire me.
10 seconds. Ready on camera. One. Good evening.
Any man who protects communists is not fit to wear that uniform.
You can't convict people by rumor and hearsay and innuendo.
Are my children going to be asked to denounce me? Are they going to be judged on what their father was labeled? I see a chain reaction that has no end.
Charges were in a sealed envelope. Nobody saw them.
Wouldn't you guess that the people who have seen the contents of that envelope might have a better idea of what makes someone a danger to his country? Or do you think it should just be you that decides?
Who are the people? Are they elected? Are they appointed? Is it you?
I've searched my conscience, and I can't find any justification for this.
Our next show is going to be about Senator McCarthy. We're going to go right at him.
We will not walk in fear one of another. This is no time for men who oppose Senator McCarthy's methods to keep silent.
Mr. Edward R. Murrow has made repeated attacks upon me and those fighting communists.
Somebody's going to go down.
You're going to get audited this year.
Not me, you.
McCarthy wants April 6th.
I will not be deterred.
He's going to come after me.
You understand the position you're putting us in?
Let's walk very carefully through these next few moments.
Why don't you just fire me, Bill?
Go after Joe Kennedy. We'll pay for it.
Murrow is the symbol, the leader, and the cleverest of the jackal pack, engaged in propaganda for communist causes.
Okay, fellas, here we go.
We might as well go down swinging.
We're going to go with the story, because the terror is right here in this room.
10 seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2.
We cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. Good night, and good luck.
Citizens of the internet, welcome to number 62 in the politics, the ongoing saga of politics. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Sunday. And I thought I would start out with that trailer for the movie Good Night and Good Luck as kind of a precursor to the first thing we're going to talk about today, because it's eerily reminiscent, that whole storyline, if you don't know it, about McCarthy era and the secret list of communists and the way that they scared the media. Now, of course, back then, you had people like Murrow in the mainstream press who pushed back against it. You don't have that today, at least not in the mainstream press. Everyone is a good little doggy that follows the narrative. So there's a bunch of things we're going to talk about today. I kind of wanted to pontificate a little bit about the Drake-Kendrick thing, just because I think there's so many little political things tied into that, and just hip-hop culture in general and how different people are connected to it. But he just did a concert here in LA a few days ago, about a week ago at this point, and a bunch of people, were singing the lyrics to his songs, and it kind of it got me thinking, because I know a lot of people. I'm a huge fan of rap music, mainly because when I was a kid, I noticed that listening to at least intelligent rap, like Hieroglyphics and DOS Effects and Wu-Tang, and it increased my vocabulary. It actually made me smarter. Now, there's a lot of rap that you could probably argue doesn't do that, but I think the divide with the Kendrick and Drake thing is political on a level, because, I don't have any ill feelings toward Drake. Like, he's a huge star. He's got some good songs, whatever. But I think the whole characterization of what happened between him and Kendrick Lamar is an interesting divide, because it's like the difference between a person who has real integrity and real dedication to their craft and a guy who's kind of like landed there. I said it in a tweet, basically. Kendrick Lamar is a black man who grew up in Compton, and Drake is a Canadian actor. Regardless of what you think about their race stuff and who's more black or whatever, that's just the bare facts of it. And I know a lot of people who were huge Drake fans who are like kind of just generally vapid people, vapid, however you say it. They're just really not that they're bad people, but they're just, like, I just want to get drunk and do stupid shit. Whereas the Kendrick Lamar camp is a lot more about, having personal integrity and writing these lyrics. When you dig into the bars in that song, Not Like Us, that Kendrick put out, there's so many different layers to it. Like there's a line where he goes, trying to strike a chord and it might be A minor. And that's hilarious as a joke because, the minor double entendre thing. And the fact that Drake definitely, fucks with girls that are way younger than he should. But also a lot of people didn't notice this, but there's so many layers to what Kendrick does. And A minor is a chord that doesn't have any black keys in it. So that's another interesting, kind of layer to that stuff. But anyway, I think that cultural battle in hip hop is analogous to a lot of what's happening in politics, where it's like you have these kind of prefab, what's the best word to use? Actors, my conservative friends would call them crisis actors, or even so. Moving on to actual politics, AOC. It's like back in the day, I supported Justice Democrats. I supported AOC. I supported all this stuff. And a lot of my conservative friends would say, oh, AOC's an actor. And I was just like, oh, come on, man, whatever. She's not an actor. She's a bartender. Now I wonder if they're right about that. A lot of people call her AOCIA and all that stuff. And this past weekend, what's happening right now is, well, let me start with something else here. I showed you that clip from the trailer I showed you that trailer for Good Night and Good Luck because it's analogous to something that's happening right now. And if you pay attention to Twitter at all, the big news on Twitter recently was that Nigel Farage, who is let me actually Wikipedia this guy because I know he's involved in British politics, but I am by no means an expert on British politics. So apparently he is the Reform leader, the leader of the Reform Party in the UK. And so basically what he said, he came out and was critical and said that the West is responsible for igniting the war in Ukraine. Now, as you can imagine, the response to that was interesting, but let's read what Greenwald here has to say. That being critical of U.S. NATO foreign policy means you're a Kremlin agent should have died with Joseph McCarthy and the Murrow era that I just showed you the trailer for Good Night and Good Luck, a movie made by George Clooney. Yet it's Western liberals' main tactic. Many world leaders, along with countless scholars, have made this same casual link without justifying Russia's invasion. So the line is very McCarthyistic when you criticize this. And here is what Farage's here's the BBC article about what Nigel said. So wow, did that not save? Interesting. I thought I had another screenshot in here. Hold on a second. I'm going to re-upload this because so anyway, what's going on is people who are critical of the war machine are instantly called Putin puppets. And there's a very familiar, this is very familiar to what happened during the McCarthy era. The only real difference is that now it's the Liberals Party who were called the Russians, the communists back in the day, doing the same thing. And it's really weird to me with all the there was an issue with my file. What the hell is going on? Okay, let's try this again. So I'm having trouble with my damn presentation. Oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? All right, let's try this again. Anyway, you have the same people who were smeared using this tactic now using it to smear other people. And why is it not? Okay, let me try this again. My computer. Okay, here we go. My apologies for the technical difficulties again. These are things that, I don't really have any control over. So back to Nigel Farage. What? There was an issue with my file. I don't fucking understand. StreamYard's like blocking my shit now or some shit. What the fuck is going on? This pisses me off, actually. This really pisses me off. All right. I'll be right back. All right, and we're back. StreamYard wanted to give me a tough time with my damn file here, but it's working now. So Nigel Farage came out and basically said the West bears responsibility for igniting the current skirmish in the Ukraine. And here's what Glenn Greenwald had to say about this. That being critical of U.S. NATO foreign policy means you're a Kremlin agent should have died with Joseph McCarthy, yet it's Western liberals' main tactic. Many world leaders, along with countless scholars, have made this same link, casual link, without justifying the Russia invasion. So here's what Piers Morgan had to say in response to this. The sheer volume of deluded Putin apologists like this guy on here is genuinely shocking. Imagine racing to defend one of the world's most diabolical dictators after he illegally invaded a sovereign democratic European nation. That's the kind of dynamic, that's the lie that you have to believe to use this tactic. And let's read what the guy's actually saying here. You're a Putin puppet if you point out how NATO expanded from 16 to 32 member states after the fall of the Soviet Union, directly threatening Russia. You're a Putin puppet if you understand that the West is interested in Ukraine because of energy, not democracy. So it's very clear what's going on here, but let's read the BBC article about this. Rivals attack Farage for saying West provoked Ukraine war. Nigel Farage has been criticized for suggesting the West provoked Russia's invasion of Ukraine by expanding the European Union and NATO military alliance eastwards. Now, ask yourself a question. If China started building bases and setting up missiles on the Mexican border or the Canadian border, do you think the United States would respond? I think that's a fair question to ask. And we're not... The other thing that I love here is just by asking these kinds of questions, all of a sudden you're the bad guy, where it's like, no, these are things that you would strategically want to consider. These are things that, you know, as adults, we should be discussing. And the general, you know, tone is just to shut everyone down and not talk about it. No, you're not allowed to hear what Russia has to say. Why? Why aren't we allowed to hear what they're saying? I think it's fair, you know, in an informed democracy to know what their side of the story is, whether it's true or not. We can listen to it and use our big boy brains and decide, you know, look at the evidence and decide what's real and what's not. But no, you're not allowed to do that these days because, you know the reason why. Say, but he added that the expansion of EU and NATO gave him so. The Reform UK leader told the BBC that, of course, the war was President Vladimir Putin's fault. Yes, of course, he invaded. The thing is, it wasn't necessarily his fault. People want to forget what happened before 2022. There was a bunch of stuff that predates what happened in 2022 that the United States was frankly directly involved in, and so was the EU. So anyway, continuing here. Former Conservative Defense Secretary Ben Wallace, who is not standing in the election, told BBC Radio 4's Today program, Mr. Farage was like a pub bore we've all met at the end of the bar. Okay, great. Does that take away from anything he's saying? No. That's your opinion about him. Conservative Home Secretary James Cleverly said Mr. Farage was echoing Mr. Putin's vile justification for the war, and Labour branded him unfit for any political office. Former UKIP leader said that he was one of the few figures that had been consistent and honest on the issue. So the BBC, as bad as it can be, at least in the first paragraph here, maintains some kind of a like tone of what's the word? They're in the middle, basically, not biased at all towards either side. You don't see that in American press. Like if you watch CNN or MSNBC or read the New York Times or the Post, they're just like, Trump is evil, and they're defending Biden. Well, he's old, but oh, look at this. In an interview with BBC's Nick Robertson, Mr. Farage was challenged over the judgment and past statements, including when he named Russian President Vladimir Putin as the world leader he most admired in 2014. Okay, that was 2014. So... But to cap this off, this is a cartoon from posted by Mass Strike Now on Twitter, and I'm just going to let you get a load of this. Oh, now my screen is blocking. So if you follow this, it's got this girl, she lands on a desert island. She's trapped, and she's like, yeah, what do? I make a help sign, and look, there's planes, and they're ignoring me. So she goes back to the drawing board, and she writes, our workers have democratically decided not to share the fruits of their labor with the rich, or give the fruits of their labor to the rich. And then the next frame, you see all these warplanes landing with American flags and shit on them. And that's unfortunately the sad reality of the world that we live in today. I mean, it's a very accurate satirical take. So just remember that if you have any problem with or any question about the war, you're working for Russia or you're working for Hamas. Or I think it was Dave Smith make this joke the other day that I thought was so good. Someone accused him of being a Putin puppet. And he's like, oh, don't you realize we've moved on now? Now I work for Hamas. Because that's how ridiculous the claims are. Like they just move on. Who's the bad guy now that we can claim you're working for if you inject any kind of, nuance or valid questions into the debate? So speaking of terrible people and sellouts, let's talk about AOC and the squad next. And believe me, I've got plenty of vitriol for both sides of the aisle today. So if you pay attention to Twitter, if you've been watching what's going on, Jamal Bowman is being challenged in his district race by a right-wing Democrat because he has not been pro-Israel enough. And Hillary Clinton has already come out and endorsed his opponent. I think the guy's name is George Latimer. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. But basically now Jamal Bowman, who has been a simp for the Democrats almost completely. He's the guy, he pulled the fire alarm to prevent a vote on some stuff. Now he needs the help of the people who got him elected that he hasn't delivered for. And of course, they're not showing up because they were cheated. So let's start with this. This is a tweet from Ajamu Baraka. And he's got this retweeted this tweet from the people for Bernie Sanders. And he just says, "This is sad." And yes, it is very sad, but let's listen. So she's coming out to, I think it's a Cardi B song, and I got a couple more takes on this that are really good. So actually, this is, I think, better footage right here from Defiant L's. Now, Russell and Keaton were at the scene here too. Russell Dobular from Due Dissidence was at the scene, and he kind of showed at the beginning how there were very few people. I think there were only like 200 people there in Brooklyn on a Saturday. That's pretty pathetic. So here's what, check this out. So this is Defiant L's, and he says best comment wins. So let's watch this. There's better sound on this because this person's closer, so you can hear the Cardi B song playing now. So I thought this was great because she says, "Are you ready to fight? Are you ready to take this borough back?" And this guy's comment, "What is she on about? You've had the Senate and the presidency for the past 4 years." And that they already have that borough, but it's about to be snatched up by someone who's a little more friendly to Israel, basically. And so I think the best take here on this came from the guys from Revolutionary Blackout Network, and Nick had this to say: "We need these MFs to lose so they can stop dragging what it means to be a socialist to the right. Jamal Bowman supported Nazis in Ukraine. No one on the left should be supporting these goofballs."
What's up, everybody? We are just a few days out till the election day, our primary election on Tuesday, June 25th. But the good news is that the polls are open right now, and we are here for our brother, Jamal Bowman. We want to turn out the vote. I don't care if you live in New York 16 and are turning out to vote for him. I don't care if you live outside New York 16. We are texting our friends. We are turning out. We are calling our friends in Tuckahoe, in White Plains, in New Rochelle, in Yonkers, and telling them to vote for Jamal Bowman.
Ceasefire now, y'all. That's what we're doing. Ceasefire now. Let's get it popping. The polls are open today. The polls are open tomorrow. Make sure you get out the vote.
So now he's on the right side of something, and he needs the support of the progressives who got him elected, and he's not gonna get it. I don't think. I mean, obviously he's a better choice than the guy that the Democratic Party is propping up, but does he deserve the help of the progressive left who hoisted him into that spot? I don't believe so. Let's see what Tony Blinken has to say about it.
Keep on bombing lots of people. Keep on bombing lots of people.
Thanks, Tony. So as you can see, we are in a place where we need to let the Democrats lose. I think it was Lawrence O'Donnell who said it best. Let me see if I can pull that clip up. Do I have it? Do I have it? Yes, I have it. Should we watch it? Why not? Where are you, Lawrence? Just in keeping with the in the spirit of what Nick just said.
If you want to pull the party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them. If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party because the left had nowhere to go. If you want to pull the party, the major party,
you must show them you're capable of not voting for them. So thank you for that sentiment, Nick and crew. And wow, what a, as Nick would say, they're in shambles. Moving on. This is an amazing piece. This is probably the centerpiece of the show, I would say, today. And it's because I love Candace Owens. I've been watching Candace Owens talk, and she's right about a ton of stuff. But where she loses me is with this Disneyland conservative shit. And I'm going to show you what I mean, but I think this picture kind of accurately represents the way that a lot of conservatives see the world. It like it's this happy, like, oh, if we just bring God back, everything will be fine. Oh yes, God is the answer to everything. No, it's not. In fact, God is the reason we're in the predicament we are now, because religion promotes subservience. And I mean, if you're gay, the only reason you have to feel guilty about that, or feel like be ostracized from society, is some religious nuts view that being gay is somehow wrong in the Bible, which it's not. It doesn't say anything about it in the New Testament. And so it irks me when people like Candace Owens, who are otherwise very intelligent and to the point on a lot of issues, basically completely fumble the ball on this. So Candace Owens had this discussion, and this segment's going to be called The Disneyland Conservatives, because I want to just show you how out of touch with reality Candace is on this issue. So watch this clip. This is her talking about porn addiction on the on her podcast and answering some reader questions. And check this out.
Obviously an ill, it's obviously very bad, and yet there are people that are completely brainwashed and think that it's a matter of free speech. Like, obviously that's not free speech. People just having sex on a camera is not a matter of free speech.
Okay, that right there, out the gate, people are brainwashed to think that that's free speech. Now, Candace, what we know about free speech is that you have to protect speech that you don't like. Also, the great Bill Hicks once asked the question, what is pornography? What is pornography? Let's see what Google defines as pornography. Now, the definition, I think, has probably evolved a bit since Bill Hicks was, on the scene, I guess. But let's see here's what Google says, and let's talk about it. They got these AI results now. Pointed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or activity intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings. So keep that last part in mind. Intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings. Now, what Bill Hicks pointed out back in his day, here, let me blow that up for you. I'm sorry, that's a little small. What Bill Hicks pointed out in his day was that, his joke was, doesn't that sound like every commercial on TV? And the Bud Light commercials have the chicks in bikinis cracking beer, and and then he goes into this whole joke about how if they could do it, they just have a naked woman with her fingers between her legs and enjoy Coke, because. So what do you actually define as pornography? That's where it becomes a slippery slope, because once you have that control mechanism in place, and this is the control mechanism that Candace is advocating for, I'm going to go into why she's wrong about this, because she's dead wrong about this. Once you have that control mechanism in place, the definition of what's pornography can shift. Suddenly, if you show pictures of a dead baby that's naked on a war zone, that's pornography, and they can censor that, and they can call that pornography. They can call anything. They're like, well, it's naked, so it stimulates erotic feelings, So it's these. When you start advocating for this stuff, you look ridiculous for like censoring porn. And also, Candace, you have the right as a parent, as a head of household, as the mother of a family, to keep pornography out of your household. This is another area where the conservatives just become the same hypocrites that the left is, because typically they're advocating for personal responsibility. And as a parent, it's your personal responsibility to keep pornography, keep your kids away from pornography. Talk to your kids. Now, it could be argued that in today's world, it's nearly impossible to completely shield your children from pornography because it's everywhere. But that doesn't give you the excuse. They could have made the same argument back in the day with television. Now, should pornography and certain things be censored from certain environments? Absolutely. I mean, if there's a kids channel, they shouldn't be showing adult commercials or things like it, whether it's on the internet or on TV or whatever. But let's continue listening to Candace here, because this gets better.
Though this person writes, I never watched porn because my father told me that's some father's daughter, and if you watch it, you shame her, him, and the whole family. Wow, that's powerful. From conversations with friends.
Now, that's a little emotional. Would this person apply the same logic to watching a soldier kill someone on a battlefield? If you do, people who commit war crimes, are their families guilty of that too, of that sin? When it's porn, it's like, oh, well, the daughter and her, you're watching porn, you're completely ruining the family and the person who's involved in it. So that, again, that's something that could carry over to anything. Now, when it comes to sexual stuff like prostitution and porn, there also is a fine line between consensual and forced. So, of course, I'm against anyone being forced into doing anything. But when it comes to pornography and prostitution and a lot of stuff, it's consensual. Like, these women are adults. They make the choice to do it. And there are male prostitutes too. Obviously, it's a lot less common, but let's keep going. We're going to go into the history of this in just a minute.
I've learned that advice saved me a whole lot of heartache too. Wow, that is, I'm very glad that you shared that. And it's something that people should maybe say to their sons when they're growing up, because they are exposed to it. And it is very true. It saves you a lot of heartache, especially as a man. As I've said, men are wired differently. Well, this person has a disagreement. Vic writes, I'm a big fan of Candace, but I don't agree with banning things like pornography, and I do indeed see it as a slippery slope. If we ban porn because it's harmful, there are many other things that will eventually be banned for that reason. If we care about freedom, we have to care about the freedom for people to do things we don't agree with to at least some degree.
There we go. Now, kudos to Candace for airing that viewpoint. She's going to tell you why she disagrees with it, but I will give her credit for giving that viewpoint airtime at the very least, because I feel like a lot of people don't do that. They don't give airtime to views that they disagree with, or even try to debate views that they disagree with. So listen to what she says to this. This is great.
Yeah, I think it's the exact opposite. I mean, people act like we lived in a society that there was always pornography. There wasn't. And that's why I said we need to do an episode, which I think I will try to do next week, where I take you through the history of pornography in this nation.
The only reason pornography didn't exist, the whole time is because of media, because it's really what mass media and the ability to display images to people on a massive scale is really where it came into the West. But anyway, let me let her finish here.
It actually is the opposite. The slippery slope theory has been proven true, that because of pornography, we are now suffering from a variety of different ills. It is impacting families. It's impacting relationships. It's impacting men. Men have addictions. It's impacting human sex trafficking. So the slippery slope, you're right. It is a theory that has proven true, but our society was functioning just fine with an understanding that this is not an example of free speech. We are the people that are offering their bodies on the internet, and readily accessible to young children who stumble upon it. That is not an example of free speech.
Unfortunately for Candace, she is dead wrong about this. Just listen to the mental gymnastics she's doing here. I don't like it, so it's obscene. It's not free speech because I personally don't like it. And again, don't watch it. Don't allow it in your household. Take some personal responsibility.
In fact, what it actually is obscenity. And the founding fathers of this nation never had a viewpoint that obscenity was a matter of speech.
Actually, yes, they did, Candace, because obscenity is defined by religion, by people who claim to have morals, whatever, people who also support war and death as long as it benefits their, fits their worldview. But this idea that let me just take that back just a little bit and listen to this again, because
free speech. In fact, what it actually is obscenity. And the founding fathers of this nation never had a viewpoint that obscenity was a matter of speech.
Actually, they did. It's in the First Amendment where it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That's for you, Candace, specifically, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So that's the first fucking amendment of the Constitution. And it does deal with obscenity because obscenity is subjective, Candace. What you view as obscene, I might not view obscene. Maybe I like pornography. I have that right in a free society. You do not have a right to impose your religious views on the masses. And this is the problem that I have with a lot of conservatives is out of one side of their mouth, they're like, oh, free speech, we gotta, on the other side of their mouth, no, we're going to lock down everything that doesn't jive with our Christian values. The same Christians who are arming a fucking mass murder on the other side of the world in several countries, actually. So we're a Christian nation. No, we're not. And I would argue that the proliferation of violence has affected our society a lot more than the proliferation of pornography. And this is why I call people like Candace the Disneyland conservatives, the people who view the world through this fairy tale lens where everything was so great when we had God, but since God's been taken out of society, which God has not been taken out of society, that's the same level of drama queening that the Israel people and the trans people do. White Christians are more powerful than they've ever been. Christianity is not downtrodden. You can be a Christian. but this like fairy tale view of that, like, you know, oh, if we just, you know, get porn out of society and bring God back into schools, everything's going to be fine. It's Mickey Mouse fairy tale bullshit. So on the porn thing, let's get into this a little bit deeper. So this is an article from, you know, you can say it's whether it's a respected publication or not. It's one of the few things I found that had a quick summary, but it's from Fulcrum, which is a University of Ottawa. It's a Canadian news outlet. So here's what they say. The mediums of pornography have changed with the advent of new technologies, but the substance of the genre has remained similar over centuries. The use of erotic material, however, has not always been the same throughout time. So this is why I call these people the Disneyland conservatives, because problems like prostitution and pornography have been a part of humankind long before the United States even existed as a country. Prostitution is the world's oldest profession. Ronald Reagan famously said, you know, politics is the world's second oldest profession, but it bears a close resemblance to the first. He was referring to prostitution. So the idea that you can just regulate prostitution and pornography away is on its face a fairy tale and idiocy. But again, if you're true to your values and you believe in freedom of speech, you believe in freedom of speech for things that you are emotionally against, that you emotionally don't like. So let's read the next little piece of this here and go into the weeds a little bit. So pornography as a term takes its root in modern Greek. The word pornographie, or whatever, first appeared in the French language during the early 19th century and in English by the mid-19th century. Classical forms of the art depict a variety of erotic images, although they are very different from what it is currently considered porn. These sexual images were not used to excite the genitals as many use them today, but instead were political, a means to shock and criticize religious and political authorities. So again, here's Candace advocating the history of porn was originally a criticism of political figures, the elites, the powerful. And here's Candace advocating, you know, oh, we gotta stomp this out. It's not actually free speech because I'm emotionally triggered by it and it upsets me. But let's keep going. Marcantonio Raimondi, an Italian man, was one of the first people imprisoned for displaying images of a sexual nature. So again, it's like with these conservatives, okay, so what? You're going to put people in jail now who film sexual activity or film, you know, lewd imagery? Like that's what you think freedom entails? Really? After he created a series of erotic engravings in 1524. So this is one of the first like historically documented incidents of pornography in 1524. And Candace Owens is blaming pornography on the downfall of America. Yeah, it's not that our ethics are lost or that everything is about money. It's that people see sex stuff sometimes. Pietro Artonio, an Italian author credited as the founder of modern pornography, helped negotiate Raimondi's freedom. The French Revolution played a major role in the development of pornography. The French Revolution, there you go. We got to make pornography illegal. Yo. Just imagine, like, do you know the Victorian era? Candace is like one of those Victorian elites from the Victorian era, all prim and proper, like, oh yes, the pornography is so disgusting. We must stomp it out. It's so terrible. Pass me the crumpets. The French Revolution played a major role in the development of pornography. The use of X-rated material as a political tool increased substantially leading up to the revolution. Many satirical works used porn to mock political leaders. We got to ban it. Got to ban it. I'm for freedom and expression and got to ban that. Pornography had only been readily available to elite classes, and distributors were not prosecuted by authorities until the material became accessible to everyone. So it used to be just for the people who, you know, the Victorian people who are like, oh, I'm so prim and proper on the surface. And they're like, you know, the leadership anyway is making sure everyone obeys their rules, which is common of religious dogmatists. One set of rules for you because you need to be godly and Christ-like, and I'm the preacher, so I'm going to go bang choir boys or, you know, dudes' wives on the side because God, you know, whatever. Pornography had only been readily available to elite classes, and distributors were not prosecuted. So in Europe, as print became more affordable, erotica was marketed toward the masses, and legal action was taken to stop its distribution. Despite the authorities' efforts, X-rated industries developed in major urban centers like New York, London, and the UK. So it's like prostitution. Once it is a thing, you're not going to get rid of it. It's like people would make the same about guns, right? It's like you're never going to ban guns. Yes, there should be, you know, better regulation. People should, you know, there should be more accountability, I believe. And maybe that's the case with porn too. But you're never going to ban it. You're never going to be able to completely ban guns, especially now that people can 3D print them. And it's the same thing with porn. You cannot ban something that there's a high demand for, whether you like it or not. What you can do is take personal responsibility and make sure that it stays out of your household as an adult if you disagree with it. And that's fair, but that's not what Candace is advocating for here. So the growth of photography in the 1820s. So already we're to the 1820s. So that's that's like 220 years ago that the growth of photography in the 1820s changed porn because like print, photos made it easy to distribute en masse. In addition to photography, halftone printing and film made their debut as a medium of pornography in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Widely considered to be the first pornographic motion picture, à la queue d'or, à la bonne, à bourge, sorry, French people, I'm terrible, was released in France in 1908. 1908. An X-rated Argentinian film, El Cetario, also dates back somewhere between 1907 and 1912. Regardless of which film came first, the relationship between the silver screen and erotica was established, and the rest is history. So in the early 1900s, porn was already a thing. Technological innovation has always been vital to the way people express themselves and communicate. Pornography as a political tool and source of entertainment has been manifested in mediums such as carvings, print, film, and the internet. It reinvents itself with each new technological development. Everyone from the ancient Greeks to present-day geeks have enjoyed this arousing form of art. So just trying to inject a little bit of sensibility into my conservative friends who live in a Disneyland fairy tale here. You're not going to get rid of porn. It's great if you don't like it. I understand. Yes, there are valid arguments to be made that it does cause problems, but valid arguments can be made about anything. And at the end of the day, it comes down to personal responsibility. Alcohol is probably way more guilty of the degradation of the American family than pornography. I mean, statistically, I'm sure you could point to that as one of the number one factors in the degradation of the American family. Are we going to ban alcohol, Candace? Are you going to ban people from drinking because it hurts the family, because you don't like it? Sorry. Be consistent, please. I don't care what your, imaginary fairy tale people that you pray to or whatever think. Here in reality, we have to deal with things in a pragmatic way. And the idea that you're going to ban sexually explicit content or even prostitution, history proves that that's absolutely stupid. Prostitution has existed since documented history has been recorded, since Bible times. And pornography is, I would argue, a facet of that, especially now, because, for example, in California, prostitution is illegal, but it's not illegal as long as you film it. So if you film it as a pornographic film, then you can pay a woman to have sex with you, which is absolutely ludicrous. But that's those are the kind of mental gymnastics we do because of stupid religious dogma. If it was legal, women would be a lot more protected. They could. I think in nowadays, when you look at prostitution, in a lot of ways, the internet has made it more of a woman's thing, where they used to have to work for a pimp and a guy like controlled all their money. Now they can pimp themselves through OnlyFans and all that stuff. And you can argue, we can debate the merits and the moral, position that you have on that, but you're not going to stop it. And the best thing you can do as a religious person to, spread your values into the world is live an example of integrity. And rather than look down on people who do things you disagree with, look at them from a position of love and a position of trying to understand why they do the things they do. I would be interested to see Candace Owens interview a porn star sometime and talk to her, a woman who does this for a living, about why she does it and whether or not she enjoys it. And again, I'm not making the argument that, porn is good. There's clearly bad stuff about it. The industry is skeezy. Just the idea of selling your body for money on its face is prostitution. When you really break it down, whether it's on camera or not. But again, I'm not arguing about, abstract moral shit like that. What I'm arguing about is pragmatically, when you try to ban something like that, you're only going to create, as you saw in the history we just read, the original reason pornography was used was to attack political figures and the powerful. And so of course it was banned for that. And, I'm not saying that it's being used for that today, because it's clearly not in most cases. Like 99.9% of the cases, pornography is not a political thing now. But it is good to understand the history and, why there's kind of this organized, campaign by people to take it down, because it's like decency. And again, how do you define decency? That's subjective. And so the best thing to do is to be a moral example and take personal responsibility. So thank you, Candace Owens, for giving me a reason to complain about you today. Moving on, let's talk about something that I've talked about before, but I really want to go into the details a little bit deeper on right now. And that is the American food system. This post from Calley means, I'm just going to start with this because it's got a little bit of video. And some relevant stuff in here. So check this out. The tobacco industry created the ultra-processed food industry. And this is wild. I didn't know this. I think it's R.J. Reynolds or one of the big tobacco, maybe it was Philip Morris, bought Kraft Foods. So here's what Calley Means has to say. And this guy is a former Coke executive. The tobacco industry created the ultra-processed food industry. They shifted scientists to make the food addictive and shifted their lobbyists to convince the USDA to tell us this crap is safe. When will we stop falling for this? And so here he is talking about this on Dr.
Tobacco companies, as smoking went down, actually started buying Nabisco and Kraft and shifting their scientists over. The key thing that the food companies know is that ultra-processed food, which is now up to 70% of our diet, is a science experiment. They're hijacking our evolutionary biology and they're making the food addictive. And working for the food companies, the first part of the devil bargain is making that food normalized. So we paid the USDA advisors. 95% of the folks that make our nutrition guidelines are directly paid for by food companies. That means the USDA recommends added sugar for 2-year-olds. They say up to 10% of a 2-year-old's diet should be added sugar. We pay the lawmakers themselves. We pay the regulatory agencies. Literally, the American Diabetes Association sets the standard of care for diabetes, accepts money from Coca-Cola. So we normalize this addiction crisis. When you do a brain scan of a person eating ultra-processed food, it fits all the criteria for addiction, and we've gotten people addicted.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're saying that the major beverage companies, food companies, all of them, are bribing the scientists, bribing the regulatory agencies to endorse their formulas, their ingredients for food, to say that they're good, say that they're okay. And in fact, those ingredients are meant to addict people to the foods that they're selling.
It's the express purpose.
Interesting stuff. And Calley actually has receipts for a lot of this. So I'm going to show you this other clip from him. Well, it's not a clip, actually. It's a tweet. But I like to bring receipts. So check this out. In 1988, Philip Morris bought Kraft, forming the world's largest food producer. 3 of the 4 largest mergers in the 1980s were cigarette companies purchasing food companies. Processed food is quite literally a science experiment from the cigarette industry designed to addict us. The explicit goal of these mergers was to shift scientists from the tobacco department's declining industry to the processed food department's growth industry. And this is why, again, I love capitalism, but this is part of our psyche. It's all about money. And this is unsurprising when you dig into the fact that, we're basically being poisoned and put on a treadmill of poisonous foods and pharmaceuticals. But it's not surprising, because this pattern, you see it in everything. In any industry that has money, you see this. But let's keep going. They then use the same legal and PR playbooks to buy off research, saying these new food connections were safe, and even get the government to subsidize and recommend it. Let's not forget, government agencies said cigarettes were safe throughout the 1960s and 70s, and tobacco is still government subsidized today. On the food side, 90% of agriculture subsidies go to ultra-processed food, which is killing us. The 1990s food pyramid led to an explosion of processed food in the American diet. And today, the USDA still recommends added sugar to toddlers. Frequently, doctors and nutrition experts have attacked me for oversimplifying the reasons for the chronic disease epidemic. I would submit they are overcomplicating it. We do not need more studies. We don't need more conferences. We don't need more reports. We need to, as a matter of public policy, reduce processed food as a percentage of our diet. You could say processed food is the new cigarette, but this would not be fair to cigarettes. It's much deadlier. And here's the article from October 31st of 1988 from the Los Angeles Times. Kraft to be sold to Philip Morris for $13.1 billion. Kraft Inc. said Sunday it agreed to be acquired by Philip Morris Co.'s for $13.1 billion, or $106 per share, in what would be the nation's largest non-oil merger ever. Now, I want to go back to something he said here a little bit earlier, where he said, we don't need more studies. We don't need more conferences. We don't need more reports. This right here is the tactic, the political tactic that has been used, if you pay attention, throughout history. It's called stalling. And it's incrementalism, basically. It's what the Democrats have been doing for the last 30 years. Oh, well, we can't do that much. Like, we'll give you health care, but we'll make sure it's like a big handout to, health insurance and pharmaceutical companies. And then it doesn't work. Oh, well, maybe we can do this, but we got to be careful. This dynamic is, you see it in the news. I was just watching, we'll talk about this in a minute, but I was watching Max Blumenthal talking about how now the New York Times and the Washington Post and all the mainstream media outlets are acknowledging reporting that the Gray Zone was doing months ago. And this, I already said this, indie news is like indie music, where the good stuff is on the underground and it doesn't bubble up to the surface till like 6 months later. But that's why, because the mainstream media is using this stalling tactic. They know what's going on, but if they stall and pretend that they don't have the facts yet, and we got to do more studies, we got to do more research, we got to make sure that we're coming correct before, then they can stall and drag this out longer. And the companies that profit from it continue to profit and suffer no recourse. And you see it with the war machine, where it's like, the kind of stuff that's just now making it to the New York Times, we've known, people like us who watch indie media have known since like November of last year, but let's top this off real quick with the kind of end game for this is, so I think the main reason I wanted to talk about this is because of there's a treadmill, basically, right? So we're being sold this poisonous food, and it's fucking up our bodies. And then we're being kind of routed into this treadmill of drugs, and statins is a good example. And Calley here talks about it a lot. And I think Asim Malhotra, another one of the doctors who is skeptical of the pandemic narrative, has said that like these drugs really almost do nothing. There's studies that show they almost do nothing, but they're widely prescribed because, it's pushed by big industry. And again, when it comes to this stuff, it's not black and white. I can fully admit pharmaceutical companies have done a lot of great things. A lot of capitalist, for-profit companies have made a lot of incredible breakthroughs. You can't deny that, but that also doesn't give them license to completely fuck all of us. And I want you to check out the obvious next kind of step in this progression. I just removed it. Okay. So this is Calley talking to Tucker about Ozempic.
2 years after the very public failure of the COVID vaccines, that more people in this country would be skeptical of brand new pharma products. And maybe they are, but they don't seem very skeptical of Ozempic, which is a diabetes drug that apparently, at least in the short term, can help people lose weight. And on one level, you can see why they're not skeptical. This is a very fat country. That's a huge problem. And a lot of people, a lot of us, wouldn't mind losing 20 pounds by taking a pill. So why shouldn't we? Well, we thought it'd be interesting to hear the other side, a side that you were not hearing on the question of Ozempic, from someone who knows a lot about it. Calley Means is the founder of TrueMed. He once worked for pharma. He definitely does not now. And he joins us today in studio. Calley, thanks so much for coming on.
Pumped to be here, Tucker.
So you want to lose 20, and I'm speaking from experience.
So one of the things about our culture too is this culture of convenience. People don't want to have to work out. People don't want to be told, hey, if you want to lose weight, exercise and eat better. They want to take a magic pill that's going to fix it. Just like I don't want to cook food. I want to roll through a drive-through window and have someone hand it to me. And that is the mentality we have to get away from a little bit. Now, not completely, I'm not against convenience or technology, but I speak from personal experience where I was pre-diabetic, and I'm pretty healthy. Like I've exercised regularly for a long time, but I got to a point where my own health issues became such a thing that I started really digging into things, pre-diabetic, blood pressure problems. And of course, the medical industry wants to go, oh, well, you got high blood pressure. Here's some pills to take for that. But luckily for me, I was already a skeptic, and I went, no. I'm going to try to solve this problem naturally. I'm going to look at the things I'm doing and change them. And rather than do that, it's so much easier to sell pills. But you should watch this whole interview, but I'm just going to play a little bit at the beginning of it because it's a nice top off for what we've been talking about.
You want to lose 20 pounds. You don't really want to stop eating pizza. This seems like a super quick way to get healthier. Why wouldn't you take Ozempic? Why shouldn't I take Ozempic?
There's three big reasons Ozempic is very problematic. And I think really the Rosetta Stone to understanding what's gone wrong in healthcare and frankly, pharma industry corruption. The first point I want to make is that if a fish tank is dirty, you clean the tank. You don't drug the fish. And in America right now,
so they won't notice.
In America right now, we've got a very dirty tank. 50% of teens and 80% of adults are overweight. And this has happened in just a generation. We didn't become systematically lazier in the past generation as Americans and frankly suicidal. something has happened. And the core mistake of Ozempic is that obesity is not an Ozempic deficiency. Obesity is not the root cause of the problem. Obesity is one branch of the tree of underlying metabolic dysfunction that's ravaging our country. As we talked about, with over 50% of Americans having prediabetes now, 33% of young adults.
Most Americans have prediabetes?
Oh, it's by some measures is up to 60.
I was one of them.
Percent
of the whole country
of adults, and 33% of young adults and teens. And you have a diabetes doctor, just a generation ago wouldn't see one child in their entire careers with diabetes. Now, diabetes, which again is cellular dysfunction, is cellular disruption, totally caused by environmental factors and what we're eating. That's close to becoming upwards of 50% of kids. It's 33% and growing radically. Teens, 25% have fatty liver disease, which is something you only used to see in elderly alcoholics. So there's a metabolic health crisis that's caused by decisions, right? The USDA, which is completely corrupt, the guidelines that set nutrition standards, 95% of the guideline committees paid for by food companies, they say that a 2-year-old, that 10% of their diet could be added sugar. We have more money from agriculture subsidies in America today go to cigarettes, go to tobacco than vegetables. 90% of subsidies go to highly processed food. We've propped this industry up. Food stamps, right, which 15% of Americans depend on for nutrition.
So I want to stop right there for a second, because what he's saying is true. And if you study the science around this, which I did a little bit because it was a problem I was having, the added sugar in our diets, and it's in everything. I had to cut my diet back to salad and meat and eggs, basically, to lose any weight whatsoever, because we're constantly in a state of what's called insulin resistance because of all the added sugar in our diets. And when you get in that state of insulin resistance, you don't lose fat. Your body is storing fat. So the keto diet, the principle of it is to eat foods that are, protein heavy and more, because listen, people have all kinds of little debates about keto and whether it's valid or not. But what it really boils down to, what's good about keto diet, is it forces you to cut out a lot of the added sugar and the processed sugars in your diet. And you don't even have to do this completely. Look, I still eat pizza sometimes. A lot of times I make it myself. I get a good dough, from an Italian bakery, and then I put my own sauce or get in some sauce and put it together myself. So there's not, because when you buy from fast food companies, they spray with all these chemical butters and all this stuff like that. So just by making your own food and kind of having a little bit more control over what goes into your body, you can change things dynamically. So you should watch this whole thing. I'm going to let him go just for a little bit more, but please go watch this, because it's a really good interview. And this guy is one of those people who, of course, is not going to break through to the mainstream media, because they're all, their marketing budgets, their advertising budgets come from these companies.
10% of all food stamps funding goes to soda. We're the only country in the world that allows that. So we have
just soda.
If you sleep on your side,
All right, so
I bet you hate your
we'll stop there, because I don't want to watch ads. But I will say too that I have relatives who live in Germany, and I'll never forget my cousin's husband just laughing at the pharmaceutical ads that we run here, because they're not allowed in Europe. You're not allowed to advertise drugs on TV in Europe. And just to transition into kind of a short little transitional piece here, this is why the legacy media is largely failing, because no one believes them anymore. And this is from Glenn Greenwald. We are losing large amounts of money. People are not reading your stuff. I can't sugarcoat it anymore. Washington Post publisher telling an angry horde of Post journalists why it is necessary to make major changes, including firing the executive editor. And this is because people don't trust you anymore. People don't trust you guys. We have good reason not to trust you. But let's read a little bit of this real quick, this article. I can't sugarcoat it anymore. Will Lewis bluntly defends Washington Post shakeup. And this is from Vanity Fair. Addressing a rattled newsroom in the wake of Sally Busby's resignation, the Post CEO and publisher stressed the need for taking decisive, urgent action to set us on a different path. When the Washington Post publisher Will Lewis, new interim executive Matt Murray met with staff Monday, the newsroom was still coming to terms with the abrupt exit of Sally Busby, who had led the paper since May 2021. Everyone was pretty shocked with the email last night, one reporter said. At the meeting, according to a source present, the reporter suggested that the most cynical interpretation sort of feels like you chose two of your buddies to come in and help run the Post, and we now have 4 white men running 3 newsrooms, and expressed surprise at this development given Lewis's prior commitment to diversity. So honestly, I think diversity is important because, oh wow, can you even see that? I think diversity is important in newsrooms. I'm not going to lie, because especially diversity in income brackets, because journalism, and Matt Taibbi pointed this out, has largely become a practice of wealthy people. And it used to be that a journalist was like a gumshoe type detective person who went at powerful narratives and unraveled them. But that's not the case anymore. Now they are stenographers to power. And the reason no one trusts them anymore is because they have a track record of being wrong and lying and doing what I just said and stalling on these stories. And I can see now that my stream is freezing up because of the ad-heavy article that I was just showing. So hopefully this stops the static there. But, when it comes to a lot of issues, no one trusts the Washington Post or the New York Times or any of these outlets anymore because they just have a track record of not being trustworthy. That's why no one's reading them. That's why no one's paying for a subscription to the New York Times and listen, they do good work. I've said it before. There are reporters at the New York Times and the Washington Post who do quality work. Like they put out a lot of great stories. They're, some of the last remaining legacy media sources, but I think I replied to this something like, oh, the sweet taste of their tears, because yeah, it's like, we love to see that. People getting what they deserve. Accountability, which is something that you don't get in the United States much anymore, ever, on anything, is accountability. So I want to talk about the skirmish in the Middle East a little bit. Now, there are a lot of shows covering this in way deeper, better fashion than me. So the best I can do is show some clips of stuff that I've come across that I think is good. And Dave Smith has just been on a rampage recently. I don't know if you saw, there was a monk debate between Douglas Murray and Mehdi Hassan and some other people about the skirmish in the Middle East. And, it was widely agreed to on social media that Douglas Murray and the, pro-empire side kind of won the debate. And so a lot of people, Dave Smith has been just dismantling people in debates for the last 6 months. And so people keep coming at him like, oh, Douglas Murray is going to own you or whatever. So I think Dave Smith has actually reached out to have a debate with Douglas Murray, and I hope I get to see that. But let's just watch him take apart some of the more silly things that Murray says. And I can't ever watch these debates and take these people seriously because so many of them are just reciting nonsense. But watch this.
They're going to take an opinion on it because I haven't seen the whole thing. But just watching Douglas Murray's opening statement and his first rebuttal was just like, I don't know, almost everything the guy's saying is just so ridiculous. And so I just figured, well, why not go through it on today's show, since this is a new thing that's kind of going viral, and we could talk about it. Now, just to set the stage for this here, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this debate, at least to me, is that the topic of the debate was not the history of Israel and Palestine. It wasn't whether Israel is an apartheid state. It wasn't whether Israel is just or unjust in prosecuting this military campaign over the last 8 or 9 months or whatever it's been. It
was whether or not showing images of the war zone is considered pornography, Candace Owens. That needs to be censored.
The topic of the debate was, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitic? So it was, is it anti-Semitic to oppose Zionism? Which, I mean, I don't even understand how that is possibly a debatable topic. Like, it's such a ridiculous claim to say that there's a political movement that it is racist to oppose. Like, by definition, you should never be allowed to say that. As soon as anyone gets into the realm of politics or a nationalistic movement, you've forfeited the right to say you're a bigot if you're opposed to this, right? Like,
logic, reason, rare logic and reason. Thank you, Dave.
that would just seem so common sense to me. But anyway,
And how do you
that's the debate.
possibly treat Jews who are anti-Zionist? So they're people then Jewish.
The thing I love about this debate too, just to take a quick sidebar here, is how it's exposed people who used to be famous for being rational, logical thinkers like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris. This debate has exposed that they are frauds. They're not rational, logical thinkers. They're just as emotionally triggered as the people that they want to criticize on the quote unquote left.
Anti-Semites?
They're anti-Semites. Yes. That is the answer. That is, I haven't watched the full debate, but I've gotten enough. I've gotten enough to hear that from Douglas Murray. Yes, the answer is that me and you are also anti-Semites, and every other Jew who's out criticizing Israel for that's it. If you think that, like, whatever, if you think the way Israel treats the Palestinian people is wrong, the only answer is that you hate Barry the dentist. Like, that's the level of argument that you have to deal with to even make it's too absurd.
And so he already pretty much dismantled Douglas Murray's entire thesis right there with his intro, but let's keep going.
Anyway, I feel like, and forget even like, I will grant that like Douglas Murray he's talented at what he does, and he's got verbal abilities and stuff like that.
Snooty Brit.
Yes, he's got
faulty incumbents pitching me bobbins. He's being diplomatic here.
That snooty Brit thing going for him. But forget even that of who's better at the sport of debate, just for the sake of taking these ideas apart and demonstrating how profoundly weak they all are. I figured we'd do that. And also I do think that, seeing as how it's a very important thing going on in the world right now, it's not just that Israel is involved in this like mass slaughter campaign against the Palestinians, but it's also the fact that I think for anybody being honest with themselves who is at all educated on the topic, Israel has a very unique relationship with the United States of America, and let's say has a fair bit of influence over our foreign policy. And so it's
also being very diplomatic,
kind of important for people like us who, let's say, passionately oppose U.S. foreign policy, particularly over the last 20 plus years, to deal with this issue. So anyway, we can start it here with let's start with Douglas Murray's opening statement from the other day at the Monk debates.
I need you to find a murderer.
I should have freaking pulled the clips, but we're gonna keep going. Torpedoes be damned. Yeah, I love, again, I've said this several times, but I value consistency, and I love Dave Smith's consistency on these issues. Like he said, if we're critics of American foreign policy, which people on the left are, you can't leave this conversation out. You can't, and this is what's so frustrating about a lot of the people on the right who were very adamant about the Ukraine thing. On this one, they're emotionally triggered, and they're not gonna take the same tack, to put it lightly. But let's watch what Douglas Adams here has to. Sorry, for the record, nerds, I've probably misspoke before and called this guy Douglas Adams, who's like arguably one of the greatest American writers who wrote. I don't actually. Sorry, he's not even American. I think he's British, but he wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So my apologies, nerds. Not Douglas Adams. Douglas Murray here. Enjoy this.
Rudyard, it's a great pleasure to be back at the Monk debates.
When I was last here a couple of years ago, I just returned from the front line of the war in Ukraine, where I was with the Ukrainian armed forces. And for most of the last 8 months, I've been in Israel and Gaza following the war.
So this guy's a very consistent NATO stan, pro-war stooge, basically, is what he just told you.
There, as closely as I can. And I won't go into all the details now that I could give you of what's happening. But I would just put it in perspective in this way, first of all. What happened on the 7th of October was not just a massive attack on innocent people inside Israel. It was the equivalent.
South Park did a joke episode a while back where they made fun of this country singer who kept saying, it's like 9/11, 9/11, 9/11. Now you have the same dynamic. It just goes, October 7, October 7. It's our excuse for anything we do. It's October 7, the new excuse.
To about 6,000 Canadians being massacred and burned in their homes in one day. It's the equivalent of about 1,500 of your fellow Canadians being taken hostage.
Okay.
You know,
this is already a very emotional argument. The equivalent of that. I mean, he uses, hopefully he used some kind of math there, but he's basically inflating the numbers by saying this is the equivalent of thousands of people dying in Canada.
you would have thought after an attack like the one that Hamas instigated, that started this terrible war, you would have thought that there would be some sympathy for the world, from the world. You might have thought the world would pay attention to the attack and at least pay attention to the people behind it. You might have expected, like me, that there might have been a worldwide opposition to the terrorists and rapists and murderers of Hamas.
Call me crazy, but I believe there was actually. There was a very large outpouring of grief and sympathy at the time. I don't know where you were. Maybe you had your head buried deep inside your own asshole, but it did happen.
You might have thought there would be hatred around the world erupting, that the government of Qatar and its mouthpiece, Al Jazeera, its funding of Hamas.
Here we go. The freedom of speech guy advocating that a media outlet that reports critically is an arm of a terrorist organization, so it needs to be shut down.
And its hosting of the leadership of Hamas in Qatar. You might have thought there'd have been an outpouring of rage at the Islamic Revolutionary government in Tehran, but no. There was an immediate outpouring of rage against the state that had been attacked.
All right, let's pause it right here. Let's just go through some of this.
When does Harry Potter show up?
He's doing everything he can.
Let me just add too that Douglas Murray sounds like a Disney villain. Like literally, he sounds like every bad guy in every Disney, like Shere Khan in the Jungle Book. Yes, yeah. Like Scar. Yes, we will get these simpletons, won't we? We will advocate for war and be disingenuous about our support of free speech.
And to summon him, that's for sure. So look, on the first note that, last time I was here, I had just gotten back from Ukraine. It's like, yeah, that's right. And you got that war completely wrong also. He was one of the people who went to Ukraine and then said, look, if we arm them, they can win. I don't know how clear he was on what his definition of winning was, but he was wrong on that one, and he's wrong on this one too. And of course,
I'm willing to bet that he was an advocate for the Iraq and Afghanistan invasions too. That's the other thing that blows me away about what's going on with like Ukraine is the Afghanistan thing. I'm like, yo, we just had 20 years of this shit, and you guys are back on board for it again? We fought Russia in a proxy war in Afghanistan in the 80s already, and it ended badly. What makes you think this is going to be different?
It's kind of interesting to start this thing with a big, appeal to emotion, which is reasonable enough that obviously talking about October 7th was a truly horrific event. And so you're going to work up some sympathy from that, understandably. It would make sense if like this debate was happening on like October 25th or even November 10th, maybe even into December. But, like the first thing, at least that just pops out in my mind is that when you sit here and you go, look how many people were killed on October 7th, and think about the proportion of what that would be in Canada. That would be as if however many Canadians were killed, right? Which is, again, I never exactly liked the logic of that, like somehow killing,
It also gives you an opportunity to inflate the numbers. That's why he did that, because it makes it look, and it's tragic. Like, I'm not denying that it was bad or that, the innocent people died, but people who are advocates for this and stalwarts want to start history from that point and ignore everything that happened before it. And that's just unfair and frankly, intellectually dishonest.
Like if there's a family of 6 next door and there's a family of 2 here, killing one person in the family of 2 isn't like way worse than killing one person in the family of 6 because there's a smaller family. So I don't like the argument that like the proportion somehow indicates something.
It's a disingenuous argument to begin with.
I think that's kind of missing the mark. But the thing that jumps out at you right away is that, well, look, the population of Gaza is much smaller than the population of Israel. And by any count, by anyone's count, more innocent civilians have been killed in Gaza by multiple factors. You know what I mean? Like by orders of magnitude, more innocent people have been killed in Gaza than were killed on October 7th in Israel. So it's just a little bit odd to start out with this like, oh, this would be like, even though it was 1,200 people killed or 1,400 people killed, this would be like, whatever, 50,000 Canadians killed or something like that. It's like, yeah, well, if you take the war in Gaza, you're going to get to a much higher number than that. So to start, doesn't work.
So that's a great point too, because the flip side of that argument is even worse.
Aside from that, this idea of almost like creating this parallel reality where Douglas Murray is going to say, you would think after something like October 7th, the world would condemn Hamas. You would think that would happen, right? At a minimum. And that almost kind of sounds compelling in a way until you like just stop for a second and rub 2 brain cells together and go, oh yeah, and they did. They totally did. What world are you living in? What world are you living in where Hamas was not condemned? Now you could say not every single person in the world condemned Hamas.
It's so analogous to 9/11 too. The situation is so analogous. Like after 9/11, we had the world on our side, regardless of what you believe about the veracity of the official story, because I definitely have some doubts. But the United States as a country had the world behind us, and then we went and invaded Iraq and kind of ruined it, right? So it's the same principle here. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but a couple months ago, maybe, Trump said something to the effect of, we need to end this war because it's making Israel look bad. It's making them look bad on the world stage, which is 1,000% accurate and goes back to the whole adults in the room thing. It's like, that is just a verifiable truth that anyone who's thinking strategically would bring to the table. But let's keep going.
Say you can find extremist voices, perhaps, who didn't, but by and large, to sum up the reaction, dude, to this day, we're talking 8-9 months later of this brutal military campaign that's been carried out that, again, has killed far, far more innocent people than were killed on October 7th. Still the first thing, I swear, every goddamn show that I'm on, every debate that I've done, everything, you always get asked, do you condemn Hamas? You always, of course, have to first and foremost say, yes, we condemn Hamas. What happened on October 7th was wrong. Now can we get into the thing that we're here to debate? And the fact is that the powerful institutions around the world were unanimous on condemning October 7th and condemning Hamas. So that one is just, again, it's like one of those things where it's like you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. It's just factually not true that there was an absence of a condemnation of Hamas. That's just not true. He then immediately...
And so I want to take a little sidebar here because this is typical in a lot of these debates. And I've made this analogy before, but this is what happens when you debate people about guns. I'm not against guns. I don't think you could, like I've said it earlier in the stream, I don't think you could ever rid the United States of guns. You couldn't. Even if it was made completely illegal and banned, people would still have them. That's a reality. Criminals would still have guns. People would disobey the law. And you shouldn't be a criminal just for having a gun. But what happens is when you say, hey, we should have like maybe be more accountable, more stronger regulations on guns, make the bar a little bit higher for, people that want to get a weapon that you can quickly murder a lot of people with. As soon as you bring that up, you get this response that's like, oh, you can't ban all guns. It's like, no, I didn't say that. So right out of a gate here, Murray is using a straw man argument so the premise of his entire argument rests on this debate that is based on a falsehood, which is, you just have to basically be a believer to think that he won this debate or had any valid points to make.
He pivots to why there wasn't a condemnation of Qatar. Again, I think that there certainly was condemnation of Hamas. Much of Hamas's political leadership lives in Qatar. So, okay. But, it does kind of raise an interesting question there. Qatar is an ally of the United States of America. And maybe not technically an ally of Israel, but wink, wink, nod, nod, totally an ally of Israel. And this is why Benjamin Netanyahu can send the head of Mossad 2 weeks before October 7th to Qatar to make sure that the funds keep going to Hamas, because that was the plan, to prop up Hamas so you never have to give the Palestinians their own state. So it just seems like by the same logic he's using here, like if we do want to condemn Qatar, shouldn't we also kind of look at the fact that this is a country that has let's say, a working relationship with the United States of America and Israel? And not only was there not, let's say pre-October 7th, not only was there not pressure on Qatar to stop funding Hamas, as has been reported in the New York Times and many newspapers in Israel, there was actually pressure on them to continue. So I'm just saying that you might ask yourself those questions also, just following this same line of logic. Then he throws in condemning Iran, which is kind of like, okay, but it's never been, perhaps the reason for that is that there's never been any evidence that demonstrates that Iran was connected or involved with October 7th specifically. The other thing here that obviously Douglas Murray is...
So in what conservatives are doing right now is they're arguing that because Joe Biden allowed some assets of Iran to be unfrozen, that he supports Hamas somehow, even though he's taken over $11 million from AIPAC over his career in politics. So it's just completely disingenuous. Let me let him finish up a little bit here, and then we'll move on.
Leaving out, and this might be part of what the reaction that he's talking about to October 7th is that, October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. And it's almost like all of these guys it's like their entire case rests on acting like this was Canada and the United States of America or something like that. These were just two sovereign nations who happened to be living next to each other. And then a bunch of people, what's your camera's acting weird there?
By the way, it's the same dynamic with the other skirmish the United States is involved in. Everything started in 2022. There's no history you need to know before that. You can't listen. You're not allowed to hear what Putin or the Russians have to say. You're not allowed to hear any of that. Just know that everything started from this point that we're dramatizing in the press, and that's it.
All right, whatever. Let's keep going. They act as if these were two sovereign nations living next to each other, and then one day, for no reason, these savages just attacked. from this neighboring country. Like everything was cool until then or something. But of course, anyone who knows anything about this just knows that's not the case. And the reality is that these things are never perfect. And I know everyone tries to jump on these examples and, say, well, that's not exactly literally true. But if what is conjured up in your mind is like two sovereign states living side by side, and then one just decided to attack the other group because they just hate those people so much. They're so barbaric and so backward and so primitive and so evil. And they just hate those people for being those people, their immutable characteristics or the religion that they practice or their genetic heritage or something.
It's the whole narrative is identical to what happened after 9/11.
Like that. So they attacked and killed them. But a much closer analogy would be like a bunch of people in the toughest gang in a prison broke out of that prison and went on a killing rampage and took a bunch of hostages. Now, again, people will say like, well, Gaza's not a literal prison and there's differences between a prison that is okay. The people in Gaza have been dominated by the Israelis for longer than the Soviet Union occupied Eastern Europe. There's over 1 million people who were born into that. Substantially more than that probably, but certainly the 1 million people who are 18 and under in Gaza, all of them have just been born into this. Now, is Israel, after the creation of the state of Israel, created the refugee problem that drove so many people into Gaza, they won a war against Egypt and Jordan in 1967 and occupied the Palestinian territory ever since. Now, they will say that they pulled out in 2005, and you can go read some Dov Weissglass quotes to see what that was really all about. As Sharon's top advisor put it, it was to put the peace process in formaldehyde. But even after what they called the disengagement, even after 2005, Israel since then has maintained complete control over Gaza. I mean, down to like whether they're allowed to come and go, whether they're allowed to have an airport, which they're not, whether they're allowed to have a seaport, how far they can fish off the coast, how much they can trade with the world, whether they're allowed to have potato chips or cookies or all types of stuff, like every detail. Their tax revenue is collected by Israel. Like Israel rules the Gaza Strip and has since 1967. And the thing about people is that they don't much like being ruled by foreign militaries. And so, yes, this is a dynamic. It's not as if one group of people, or even as people like Douglas Murray won't exactly say, but will seem to imply that it's kind of the same as the Nazis attacking the Jews. Like as if there's a parallel between the ruling government attacking a helpless people and a helpless people lashing out at the people of a ruling government. Not saying either's okay, but they're definitely different. That might be part of why the world reacted the way it did. Anything you want to add, Rob, or you want to keep playing?
I agree with everything you said. And he's playing a real dirty trick when he goes, the entire world didn't condemn this, because we did until Israel took it as an opportunity to kill innocent civilians. And then as that continues to happen, everyone went, hey, you can't do that. So to pretend like people weren't outraged over what happened, or even us at the time going, hey, you had an opportunity here where the world was on your side and now you're blowing it by killing innocent civilians and destroying their homes. So, yeah, we would all just be talking about how outrageous what Hamas did to this very day if Israel did not take it as, oh, look, this is our ticket to go kill innocent civilians.
Yeah.
And that's a great point right there. So I want to kind of continue on this theme a little bit, because Max Blumenthal was recently on Judge Napolitano's show, and he was talking about the state of things right now. And it's really interesting. He goes into a couple things, but I think, like I said at the outset of this, a lot of the reporting that they have been doing at the gray zone is now being accepted as fact by mainstream media. And, you know, I've made this analogy before to the indie news world being a lot like the indie music world where, you know, all the good stuff bubbles up over time to the mainstream. You don't really hear the good stuff in the mainstream until, you know, a couple months after it's already broken on the indie media circuit. So there's a couple parts in here. I didn't really pull clips on this, so it's going to be a little dicey, but let's get into it.
The initial details and the initial existence of this peace treaty, and then Ukrainian nationalist media
So this
proceeded.
is Ukraine stuff. Hold on.
Very little. The Ukrainian state is selling off its public center of the most extreme
IDF or with international public opinion. Then the IDF says Hamas is an idea, we can't defeat it. And then Netanyahu says this. He didn't say it in front of a camera, but he issued a statement, Chris. Here it is. The Security Cabinet, chaired by Prime Minister
Let me jump up a
Benjamin
little bit
Netanyahu,
further here.
whatever his mental state is the commander-in-chief of the United States military. But have you seen this kind of a public spat between them before while their countries at war?
I can't remember any public spat like this, even when the Pentagon brass seemed to be at loggerheads with the Bush era neocons. It wasn't like this. Israel's a completely different country, if you can even call it a country. Israel is essentially an army with a state. And so the Israeli military has much more power and credibility among the public than the prime minister.
Wow.
Netanyahu is powerful. He has a strong constituency. You could kind of compare it to MAGA, maybe a little more narrow. His coalition has a lot of power among the settlers, and he keeps giving them more and more power, as well as among the police. But the Israeli military is the predominant force. And Netanyahu, this clash really represents a much deeper destabilization of Israeli society that preceded October 7th, when we saw the attempted judicial overhaul bring Israeli reservists out into the streets in protest of Netanyahu.
So one of the things I wanted to interject here is there's a lot of talk right now about the Biden administration kind of being oppositional to Netanyahu and letting through or like slow walking weapons. And to me, and this is for entertainment purposes only, my little conspiracy theory, it looks like a manufactured disagreement, because if they can make it look in the press like the Democrats are against on some level what's going on, it gives them a little bit of fodder for campaign season to go, oh, hey, see, look, we're trying to push back. Netanyahu's the bad guy. It's like in pro wrestling, if you know pro wrestling terms, the heel. Netanyahu's the heel, and they're trying to make Biden the baby face by kind of like pitting them against each other in the public, sphere. So it looks like, oh, Netanyahu's mad at Biden because Biden's actually doing something to stop him. And conservatives eat this shit up. They're like, Biden is the most anti-Israel person ever, despite his long history of being absolutely unshakably pro-Israel, taking over $11 million. Conservatives will, on Twitter with a straight face post, Joe Biden is the most pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic president in history. So it's working on some level, but let's keep going. They're talking a little bit. That's a little bit off topic, but they're kind of talking about this disagreement between the U.S. and Netanyahu.
Particularly those who come from the kind of Ashkenazi elite, who are the pilots in the Air Force, refusing to go to training. This nearly brought down the Netanyahu government. The problem is those forces do not have any single figure that can replace Netanyahu in a political sense, who has the same base. And so what you would have if you had Benny Gantz taking over as prime minister is an administration maybe with some of the backing of the military chiefs, but really which would rely on the US for its backing, and it would be a Democratic president. And this would increase tensions to the point of a near civil war inside Israel. So Israel's really on the precipice of political destabilization right now. And the longer this war goes on, the closer it gets to going over the edge.
So this is interesting, the internal politics of Israel, because I I'm pretty ignorant. Like, I'm not Jewish. I've never been to Israel. I don't know the dynamics. So I like that someone like Max, who's been there, who has contacts on the ground, I'm sure, can talk about this stuff because they're not talking about it in the mainstream press at all. They're not talking about the dynamic between, well, I shouldn't say that. They are talking about it a little bit because they're trying to frame Netanyahu as the heel and that everything will be fine if he gets out. And I've seen Schumer say stuff like this. So it's my for entertainment purposes only conspiracy theory does have a little bit of evidence behind it. But let's keep going.
What is the status of the IDF with respect to its morale and its numbers? Tom Friedman in this morning's New York Times said the elite officer corps is seriously degraded, meaning killed or so injured they can't go back to work.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at the casualties in Gaza. A majority of them are officers, but that's because it's much easier to become an officer in the Israeli army. You have almost 9,000 Israeli men who have been disabled since October 7th as a result of this war. That doesn't count just the overall injuries that didn't lead to permanent disabilities. And you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of deaths. These are the primary breadwinners of families. These are reservists. Some of them run businesses. So it's been a powerful blow to Israeli society. But then you have the overall economic blow to Israeli society, which depends heavily on tech investment.
So this is the part I was looking for to talk about, because this is very interesting to me, and a part, again, that you're not going to see much, if at all, in mainstream press. He's talking about some very interesting political dynamics that are developing around this as a result of this conflict continuing, and it's really
and by December, over 50% of foreign investment for the Israeli tech sector had pulled out. There's one firm called, I think, Bessemer. It's a venture capital firm, foreign, which had pulled out 20% of all of its investments by then. And even before then, before October 7th, these foreign investors were pulling out because of the civil strife over the judicial overhaul. Now you've seen last week, Intel, which runs a major plant in Haifa, pulled out a $15 billion chip plant in the Israeli city of Kiryat Gat. So the Israeli economy is suffering enormously. I've heard about towns in Cyprus, which is right close to Israel in the Mediterranean, having to put up new Hebrew signs around their towns because so many people are moving away from Israel to Cyprus since October.
So I don't know how. I try not to comment or use content in my stream that I can't verify, but I've seen a lot of pictures on Twitter of people at airports leaving the country, like fleeing basically because it's getting crazy. So I believe this.
Again, I mean, Israel is facing an existential crisis, and Netanyahu refuses to provide an exit ramp. And then you have Joe Biden and the Biden administration, who are so overwhelmed by the influence of the Israel lobby and by their own delusions and idiocy that they are refusing to impose an end to this. So in many ways, I mean, this is why Tom Friedman wrote this column, is that he wants the Biden administration and the Democrats, he's one of them, to save Israel from itself, but they can't do it because they themselves are basically controlled by Israel.
Interesting, because this is kind of the tack that Trump was taking several weeks ago, and people canned him for it. People bagged him for it, or panned him for it. Panned, whatever. But now it seems like the New York Times has come around to that position because, like I said earlier, more than anything now, it just looks bad. It just makes them look bad. So.
I want to play what the IDF spokesman said, and then I'm going to ask you, who would have written this? Who would have authorized it? What kind of a meeting of the minds, obviously without Netanyahu, would have come together for him to say this? Cut number 17, Chris.
Hamas is an ideology. Hamas is rooted in the hearts of the people of Gaza. To eliminate it, to replace those who run the public services, those who distribute food or steal it, there must be an alternative that can emerge. It's a decision that has to be taken politically, and the army will implement it. Until it is, Hamas will continue to exist. Hamas will not disappear from Gaza. It will not disappear.
Who or what would have, well, I think his rank is admiral, but you say it's easier to become an officer in the Israeli army. American admirals are usually older than this fellow appears to be, but be that as it may, who would had to have authorized this thumbing the nose at Benjamin Netanyahu by the chief spokesperson for the IDF?
Well, these are the gatekeepers. They're the security chiefs. That was the title of a Oscar-winning documentary about the former chiefs of the Shin Bet and Mossad, who were essentially opposing Netanyahu and the settlers and the Likud dominance of Israel because they were placing their own political priorities over the strategic imperatives of Israel's settler colonial state. They're the wiser stewards of settler colonialism and occupation, we should say. And they're disturbed. They're concerned about Israeli losses in Gaza. An M113 was blown up, or it was actually a Namur Israeli troop carrier, very advanced vehicle, was blown up by Hamas. 8 soldiers were roasted while they were sleeping in the carrier. There's video of an M113 carrier that has been left abandoned in Rafah. Netanyahu's goals are completely convoluted there. More soldiers will definitely die. But then you have the northern front, where Israel suffered, I would say, its worst defeat since October 7th without any casualties, because Hezbollah penetrated deep into Israeli territory with a Hupo drone and published 9 minutes of surveillance footage showing sensitive Israeli sites which have never been exposed before, including deep in the northern Israeli city of Haifa. This is where, according to General Secretary of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, Israel maintains major ammonia plants, which if hit by a targeted Hezbollah missile, would have the same effect as a nuclear weapon going off. He said, we don't need nuclear weapons. They have those plants there. This was the worst intelligence failure for Israel since October 7th, to allow that drone to get back. Nasrallah says they have hours more of footage. And this is not just a military war, it's an awareness war. So I think...
And this right here is why I love the Gray Zone. And this obviously isn't the Gray Zone stream, but Max and Aaron, where do you get this kind of reporting on the real nuance of the war and like the negative stuff that's happening to the side that the United States supports? You don't really get this in the mainstream.
Hagari senses that this war is going on too long. They need to get humanitarian aid into Gaza because the images of genocide are discrediting Israel on the national stage. And Netanyahu refuses to end it because, as Thomas Friedman says, something we've been saying on your show, Judge, for months and months and months, Netanyahu doesn't want to end the war because he's afraid he'll go to prison.
Right. Do the Israeli people see this, or does he still enjoy huge support because of the fury that was generated by the perception of events on October 7th?
Again, I think Netanyahu is the only figure capable of pulling together a coalition as narrow as it is for this long. And there's a reason that he is the longest serving prime minister. Israel is essentially a Likud state. So it's unclear who would replace him or how long they would last. I should also mention an Israeli army investigation of October 7th was published yesterday, about 24 hours ago.
Okay, this is very, very interesting. And it goes back to, again, what I was saying about the indie media. I keep repeating this thing because it's my thing. But the indie media is like indie music. The stuff that they're reporting on, the facts that they're reporting, slowly bubble up to the mainstream. And you're going to love this. Listen to this. This is incredible.
So corroborating everything we've been writing at the Gray Zone about Israel's use of the Hannibal. So it's unclear who would replace him or how long they would last. I should also mention an Israeli army investigation of October 7th was published yesterday, about 24 hours ago, corroborating everything we've been writing at the Gray Zone about Israel's use of the Hannibal Directive to target its own citizens on October 7th when they were taken captive. Netanyahu greatly fears an Israeli state report on October 7th. An Israeli
What's an Israeli state report? The Knesset or Netanyahu's own government?
It would be like a Knesset commission. Israel's had these reports before. They had a commission, for example, after the Sabra and Shatila massacre, which found that Ariel Sharon was indirectly responsible for presiding over that massacre in a Palestinian refugee camp in Beirut. So these can be very damaging for an Israeli prime minister. Netanyahu is trying to prevent that. And I think that might be the final blow, but it hasn't arrived yet.
So when you see these debates with people like Douglas Murray, for example, they always start at, oh, October 7th was so horrific. But as Max and these guys have reported, Israel made it more horrific than it originally was. And the evidence is Hamas didn't have helicopters or missiles when they went over the wall to go in and do the horrific things that they did. But a lot of people in Israel were killed by missiles from helicopters. And so that right there is just undeniable proof that they contributed to some of the damage that day. Now, how much, I don't know. And I'm not, again, I don't want to get my stream shut off, but this is stuff that Max and these guys have been reporting on for a long time that now is being corroborated by the legitimate, the outlets people view as legitimate, let's say.
How can Netanyahu in his right mind want to pick a fight with Hezbollah in light of everything you have just said? There are tremendous losses in Gaza. The acknowledgement and recognition that Gaza can't be defeated. The public spats with the IDF. What this drone revealed. How can he possibly talk about picking a fight with Hezbollah?
It can't. It cannot, especially given what I think is a fairly legitimate assessment of Israeli society by Hassan Nasrallah, which is that it is a spiderweb society.
Meaning?
A society where people take for granted that they can live a first world Western lifestyle in the middle of a hostile third world area where people are much more, as we see in Gaza, steadfast and able to take more casualties. So the CEO of a major Israeli electrical company stated in a press conference yesterday that Israel's
check this out. This is crazy.
Electricity grid would not withstand a Hezbollah attack. And the Israeli Energy Ministry, which is part of Israel's political coalition, countered these comments. For obvious political reasons, they're trying to prevent the exodus of more Israelis for fear of a Hezbollah attack. Hezbollah has 100 times the capacity of what Hamas does. They're not operating under siege. What Israel's been able to demonstrate that it can assassinate high-level Hezbollah commanders. It claims that it could get to Nasrallah and kill him, which would be a powerful moral blow, a blow to the morale of Hezbollah. And they're threatening to destroy Beirut. And they have destroyed large parts of Beirut. But that will not be enough to dislodge Hezbollah from Lebanon or to defeat them. And if they go toe-to-toe with Hezbollah, it will draw other forces into the war that may be too powerful for Israel to withstand. And they'll have to call on their direct line to the Gentile authorities in Washington to save the self-proclaimed Jewish state.
Have those
and that right there might be why your boy Aaron Bushnell did what he did. He saw all this stuff coming because he was active military. So R.I.P. Mr. Bushnell. We'll listen to a little bit more of this and then we'll move on.
Intel authorities in Washington employed the United States Navy in such a way as to enhance the genocide. I thought I read something that you either tweeted or said. I know you've been doing some funny stuff lately, but I don't think you meant this in a funny way.
No, I didn't. I think it was like October 10th. The Biden administration the Biden Pentagon dispatched the USS Eisenhower and a carrier strike group to the Eastern Mediterranean as a show of force against Hezbollah and its allies in Tehran. And they've been there in that area ever since. They're now guarding the Red Sea. And according to ABC News, this is the most intense and sustained deployment of any strike group since World War II. They've been there for like 8 months or so. There are 7,000 sailors involved in this deployment, and they're becoming exhausted. They're not getting a break. They're posting, according to ABC News, dark memes complaining about why they're there.
So did you hear that? We've already got troops in the region. And this is corroborated by mainstream news.
And ABC News frames this as a deployment to protect vital shipping in the Red Sea. Well, ostensibly on the surface, that's true. This is really about defending Israel's quote unquote right to commit genocide in Gaza. Because as soon as the ceasefire takes place, which could be imposed with a phone call from Washington to Tel Aviv, then the Red Sea opens up and Houthis, the Yemen's Ansar Allah Houthi party, will stop and its legitimate responsibility to protect operation against shipping, which is designed to pressure the West and Israel into ending its genocide and enacting a ceasefire. So they're there. U.S. soldiers are being exhausted, fatigued, and put in harm's way, parrying missile attacks all the time to defend a foreign, tiny little ethno-state whose prime minister is basically running de facto campaign ads against the sitting U.S. president because he won't give him enough weapons, even though he's given him more weapons than we've ever seen shipped to another country in history. Who's in charge here? Who's giving the orders to send American troops halfway around the earth? It doesn't feel like it's a sovereign American government.
And we'll stop there. But that's pretty much the size of it. Very interesting developments that, again, I don't think a lot of people are seeing. And knowing is half the battle, I guess. I've got one more piece to do before I cut out today. And it's a feel-good story about your friend Matt Orfalea. Now, I've talked about Orfalea a lot. I think he does fantastic work. Sometimes he leans a little bit, I guess, to the right, you would say, but I think he just leans in the direction of truth, you know, with the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. I was one of those people who was like, oh, fuck that kid, you know. And then I started going into the weeds and I was like, wow, he was unfairly characterized by the media. And so I kind of came around. I think Matt changed my opinion on that. But this is a really interesting piece he did, and I'm not going to show the whole thing. But he went to a pro-Palestine protest, and he ended up encountering some angry protesters. And the reason for that is he went dressed in a Benjamin Netanyahu t-shirt. And what he was doing, as he'll explain, is filming a parody video. Really, it was like a satirical video that he's filming. But I'll let him explain to you, because I think when I started watching it, I went, oh no, here we go. But the way it ended was really good. And I think it deserves to be spotlighted because it was a really good piece that he put together. So check this out. I'll put it on full screen here.
Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters surrounded the White House to demand Biden enforce a red line and end U.S. support for Israel's attacks on Gaza. Everyone wore red for the occasion, but I wore a blue shirt with the face of the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. I stuck out like a blue bandana walking through the LA Bloods gang territory. I was recording a satirical music video in support of the protesters. But protest marshals repeatedly hassled me because my shirt was, quote, scaring people.
Seeming as though you're doing something that's really scary to other people.
At the same time, a man with a Hamas headband was raising up a bloody Joe Biden mask, chanting about blood. but the protest marshals were concerned with me and my satirical music video.
We're just expressing the concern.
So as you can imagine, watching this when I first started it, I was kind of like, "Oh, great, here we go. He's been flipped." But keep watching.
Despite my attire, some protesters were very kind, and most just let me be. However, there was also a palpable intolerance in parts of the crowd that harassed me throughout the day. I was spat on, and somebody grabbed my camera out of my hands and ran away with it. The first jarring experience of the day began with a woman blocking my vision and my visibility with a keffiyeh. I rolled with it and laughed at the absurdity. After all, she was exhibiting the same intolerance that I was mocking the pro-Israel side for in my music video. But then she wouldn't leave me alone. Wherever I stepped, she moved with me. 2 other protesters were willing to be in my video, but she was so close to me, I couldn't step back to record them. So I gently tapped her, asking if she could please move back a little bit. She falsely accused me of holding her arm, so I quickly asked someone to start recording for my protection as she was acting completely unhinged. What follows was a frustrating, but also funny and fascinating experience.
All right, I'm only recording now because I don't want her to say that I assaulted her. So we're making a satirical.
So this is interesting. I think kind of what he's trying to point out here is don't be like the people you're against. And this lady, as you'll see, gets a little annoying and becomes a lot like the people that she's kind of out there speaking out against.
Stop holding my arm.
Holding your arm? I tapped you in the shoulder to ask if you could move.
You touched my arm.
Yes, exactly. I tapped you on the shoulder.
No, you didn't. You held me right here.
Oh my goodness. This is insane.
You lie like BB.
You are imitating BB yourself.
Oh, so you don't like BB?
No.
Then why are you wearing his smiling face on your shirt?
That's a fair question. So
when you know that he has been slaughtered.
I love that. He's like, that's a fair question, and then starts to answer, and she just continues yelling at him.
Thousands, tens of thousands of people. So you should know, if you're a kind person, you should know that that face and those Israeli flags is very harmful to the people who have lost hundreds of members of their family.
Okay, here's what I say. I think that his face is not harmful, and his face doesn't do harm to anybody.
Yes, it does.
Okay, we can disagree on that. I agree his actions absolutely do.
Obviously it does.
Yeah, I know. So we agree on that part.
Because his person does. So you putting his person on your chest is causing secondary trauma to the people who've been killed.
So again, with these kind of things, it's like, lady, you are making the point of your opposition now. You look as ridiculous and intolerant as the people you're trying to call out. And don't do this. Don't do that. It's not good.
I mean,
so what point are you trying to prove? You don't like him. You don't like Netanyahu. You think he's committing genocide? Do you think he's committing genocide?
He's definitely.
Would you listen to him, lady?
Committing ethnic cleansing. He probably wants genocide.
Okay, so then why are you wearing his shirt on your body, on your person?
Okay,
to prove a point that you would be censored? Because you're not being censored. You're here, and people are talking to you. So you're not being censored. You're here.
Do you want?
You're allowed to.
Do you want to learn or not?
Okay. Yes, I do want to learn.
Okay.
Tell me in a sentence if you can, because I really don't want to talk to someone who's wearing that shirt. If that's okay, is that my right, or is that censorship by me saying I don't want to talk to someone? I'm blocking you. I'm allowed to do that.
You have a right to do whatever you want.
Okay, so tell me, why are you wearing his face on your person?
It's a satirical music video that I'm shooting. And the theme is from the point of view of a pro-Israel person who thinks he's all anti-woke, but he's actually very sensitive and needs everything centered around him.
Okay.
Like From the River to the Sea.
From the river
to the sea, it's hate speech. It's too extreme. I need my mommy. Don't get me wrong, I love free speech, but if you speak, I will call the police.
Okay, and what does satire mean to you? What is the purpose of satire?
It's comedy, it's parody, it's
No,
fun.
it's not. Go and look up the definition of satire and then be intentional about where you decide to do satire when that's not in fact what you're doing. You're doing comedy, you're doing fun. That's what you're doing. Satire is something else. Comedy and fun
how would
is
you
not the definition.
how would you
Sister, can you look up the definition of satire?
Definition of satire per Google: the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues.
Okay, so can you write down your channel?
Was she just putting her hand over his
So
phone?
what he's doing is he's making a satirical video for pro-Israelis to laugh at Biden.
That's not.
I mean, to laugh at Bibi. That's what he's
very
doing.
different. That's very different.
And he thinks, I know. Can you record this?
Why am I wearing this shirt?
Record him saying
I already explained it to her very clearly. Okay, so I am wearing this shirt.
Wait, sorry.
Wow.
Real quick.
Wow. It's fine. It's fine. No, it's fine.
What's your name?
You can find my YouTube channel, youtube.com/orf, O-R-F.
Okay,
Also
ORF.
on Rumble, yes.
Okay, and you don't want to give us your name? How come?
It's right there. You can find out there.
Okay, that's fine. So now, please, Mr. Orff, tell us, why are you wearing that shirt?
Because I'm making a satirical.
He's making
It's a good thing that he's not actually a Jewish person, because this would be all over the media as documented anti-Semitism. If he was a real Jewish person who wanted to bitch about it, this is what it looks like. And again, it's like, why are you doing this, lady? Like, he's explaining to you, he's on your side.
a
Rap music
satirical
video.
rap music video
Where I'm making fun of.
where he's making fun of
The pro-Israel group. You don't need to repeat me, but you're welcome to. Okay. I'm making a satirical rap song that's making fun of how sensitive the pro-Israel group is and how hypocritical they are.
From the river to the sea is hate speech, unless the one speaking it is Israeli. But if the Israeli is a Jewish voice for peace, then magically it goes back to being in hate speech. And
If you don't mind me asking, where are you from? I'm from here, and I'm actually Arab. I'm Syrian and Lebanese. So what do you stand for? I'm anti-war. I want this war to end.
So I love this because Matt held his ground, and these dudes are calling him a pussy and calling him names and shit because they don't understand. And if you've ever read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of those habits is seek first to understand. Anyway, he puts up with their ignorance for a minute and then brings them around.
That's a cop-out answer, though. That's a cop-out answer. What is anti-war? Who do
I
you
want this war to end, and that message goes to all sides. And I mean, I don't.
It's really one side.
One side? Yeah. What do you want me to say?
Here's the question. Why are you wearing that shirt? Why are you wearing that shirt?
Can you? How many times do I need to say that?
Did you hear the answer?
Rap video.
But you're doing a rap
I'm making
video.
fun of the pro-Israel insane censorship, big
But
tech
then how
censorship.
come you were
They're
making
censoring
fun of me for censoring you when I was just holding a kafaya in
because
front
literally
of
the
you?
whole video is making fun of censorship.
censoring stuff's authoritarian. Yes, you're
So
censoring.
I'm gonna skip up to the end so you can see how this resolves, because it actually resolves on a good note. Hold on a second. Of course, I'm gonna get a dang ad. So after he deals with all these unhinged protesters, he finally kind of wins the crowd, and I want you to see the video that he does, because it's pretty funny. I mean, he already showed you some clips from it, but it's good stuff.
Approached me and told me they were glad that I was able to recover my camera.
Go back.
Expression to show solidarity with whoever is your right, and I have to
Actually,
Thank you.
So hold on a second.
The perpetrators approached me, apologized, and condemned that behavior.
This is very unacceptable. This is very disrespectful. Even if you disagreed with us, you were disagreeing peacefully.
Let me go back a little bit.
Same outfit as the perpetrators approached me.
So you can see how this
good experience to have. Because at least my clothing and leg was the
Why face the same jib?
All right. That's how we get that.
rubbed or harangued.
I think I should wear this shirt now to a pro-Israel protest. What do you think would happen then?
All right, let's start again. This guy stole his phone and then threw it after he chased him.
After that, I purchased a protest shirt so that I could take a break in peace without worrying about being robbed or harangued.
I think I should wear this shirt now to a pro-Israel protest. What do you think would happen then? Why face?
Not gonna lie, it would probably be a lot worse, but who knows?
The same jib?
All right. That's how we get that.
Probably. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know.
When things seemed to have cooled down, I got back to work until a protester walked up and spat on me. That spit wad landing on my clothing and leg was the cherry on top of a truly miserable video shoot. And during all that hate, wasn't a
white
good
dude
experience.
too. I love it. He's not even like
But
he's not even Arab or Palestinian. He's like some white kid.
In a way, it was a good experience to have. Because at least for me, it was a great reminder to not rush to judgment based on appearance. Not only because I was mistreated based on my appearance, but also because all of the assholes I encountered didn't appear any different than all the good people I met at the protest. Each time I was assaulted, a protester wearing pretty much the same outfit as the perpetrators approached me, apologized, and condemned that behavior.
This is very unacceptable. This is very disrespectful. Even if you disagreed with us, you were disagreeing peacefully. You were just, making a music video, practicing your right of expression to show solidarity with whoever is your right, and I have to respect that.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I apologize for that. This does not actually represent the tens of thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinians who came today.
At one point, a group...
And when you see that, it makes you wonder how many of the people that assaulted him are ops or, fake protesters, infiltrators designed to create that kind of thing. If you see someone go to this protest and if you see someone that looks Jewish or pro-Israeli, assault them. It's a conspiracy theory, yes, but it's not without historical precedent. So, for entertainment purposes only, all that good stuff.
Group of protesters approached me and told me they were glad that I was able to recover my camera.
Because obviously that's not something that I support. Our cause doesn't support that. It's not right.
Then pro-Israel people came over to fist bump me because they liked my shirt. And there was a positive dialogue.
As much as we disagree, we have some agreements.
Yeah, we do. Look,
You're Jewish, I'm Muslim, we're cousins.
I support having, this is freedom of expression here. I got no issue with it. And so, and let's hope things get better. Okay. All right. Take care. Good job.
And despite...
Makes you feel good to see this kind of coming together happening a little bit, despite all the divisive shit going on, right?
What the protest marshals thought.
They can help me explain to them instead of telling me to stop. I think they absolutely will.
Plenty of the protesters understood perfectly well what I was doing. So not only was I able to have some good civil conversations, many protesters were happy to help me make my music video.
Do your thing.
Cool. Here we go.
Here's his video. A worthwhile endeavor.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Is hate speech? Hate speech. From the river to the sea is too obscene. Learn to say something not too extreme, like nuke 'em like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Nuke 'em like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. From the river to the sea is just too extreme, yeah. Nuke 'em like Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
So I don't know if you catch this. I don't want to keep interrupting, but he's pointing out how it's ridiculous people being upset about saying things like from the river to the blank when there are people literally calling for the annihilation in Congress of Gaza.
Palestine to my dick, fuck ass piss and shit. From the river to the sea is too offensive, and now it's a legal offense in Texas, cause river to the sea is too dangerous to be said. Don't get me wrong, I think censorship sucks. I think everyone but me has become woke cucks. Dumb fucks, cocks and cunts, all caught in a bunch. Censoring stuff's authoritarian, yes, you're censoring.
I love that he's got the lady, he's got the angry lady in his video from the beginning. So beautiful.
The sea is hate speech. It's too extreme. I need my mommy. Don't get me wrong. I love free speech, but if you speak, I will call the police. Oh my God, officer, there's a terrorist peacefully chanting Palestine will be free. And that Palestine sign stabbed me in the eye with genocide so hard it hurt my feelings. From the river to the sea is hate speech, unless the one speaking it is Israeli. But if the Israeli is a Jewish voice for peace, then magically it goes back to being hate speech. And even Elon agrees that it's hate speech. If you say from the river to the sea, I'll lock you up and throw away the context. Suppress your content, suspend your comments all across X. Both Hamas and Israelis are bombing babies, but what we need to stop is all this hate speech. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is a rhyme that's a crime and needs to be bleak. From the river to the bleak, Palestine will be bleak. Thankfully from sea to shining sea, speech is free. But from the river to the Palestine will be thankfully from sea to shining sea, speech is
So you can take this and go and put it on YouTube and get comedy and fun.
Beautiful video.
Or whoever made that.
What a G Matt Orfalea is. I've referred to him as the new Jon Stewart on multiple occasions because he's the guy. He just put up a piece about Fauci that's really good too. He's the guy who meticulously goes through old news stories and surfaces stuff that people missed or is ridiculous. And my hat is off to Mr. Orfalea. Just what a great piece, showed how ignorant people can be on either sides of the equation and then engaged with people and made friends. And that's what I want to see more of. And we're going to close out here with something that's related. Another piece from our good friend Ian Carroll over at Cancel This Clothing Company. But this is about a bar in Idaho that basically did a heterosexual day. And I think what's great about it is, again, it ties into the understanding thing and the censorship thing, but just watch and we'll close out with
June Heterosexual Awesomeness Month. And oh boy, the controversy is out of control. The place is called Old State Saloon and all their patrons are hyped about it. They're like giving out free beer to straight guys and discounts to straight couples and there's a day for straight women too. And they're getting like death threats and stuff in the DMs. The news is eating it up. But the part that I think is really interesting is that X is like fucking with their account. It's a new account, but I went and tried to follow it. And check out what happens when you try to follow Old State Saloon. Every time you refresh, it's gone. They've been up like above 1,000 followers over and over and over again, and it keeps on coming all the way back down. They've been posting a bunch of screenshots of the evidence of their follower count just getting decimated. It's like...
So this makes me wonder, with all Elon's talk about free speech, if there are still other elements at play in his organization censoring stuff, because this seems like something he might be on board with, strangely. But let's keep watching.
What's going on, Elon? I even went to other pages and came back. Can't follow him. And I was digging through their Facebook and just wanted to highlight that there are some LGBTQ people out there that don't take life too seriously and have senses of humor and aren't stressed and aren't hating. I think everyone takes the world way too seriously and is way too easily offended by things. It's like, way to go, William. Way to not just like want to fight everybody. You're awesome. Clearly, this is super popular with their clientele and their town. But the internet is having a fucking time about it. So I don't know. You tell me, is that like a really bad move? Is it like no taste? Is it hilarious? Is it awesome? Are you about to go try to follow them on X? You go try it for yourself. See how that goes. I just think it's a little weird that like you're not allowed to celebrate happy, healthy families and the continuation of the human race. Like, I love all people. Everyone's great. I got no judgments for anyone. It's just weird when we hate on straight people. Like, isn't the whole idea to just like let everyone live their lives and not hate people because of their identities?
Yes. And I think that's a good note to end on. Just understanding, you know, even people that you vehemently disagree with or you think are hateful, the tone of the last 10 years has been so terrible and it's been so divisive. And I'm so on board with anyone who has this type of attitude, this type of, I want to understand why people feel the way they do, because once you take that tack with people, you find that you have a lot more in common than, you know, the things that you disagree about. So on that note, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with me. I rarely say it. I rarely say like and subscribe and all that shit, but the people that have been doing it without me saying it, I can't thank you enough. And follow me on Twitter. Let's talk there. I appreciate all of you. And I hope you have a kick-ass weekend. And let's just end with my favorite Blinken song and the mentality of the United States for the last since World War II, really. Take good care of yourselves out there. We'll see you next time.